drink during the session because I have got a throat pain and I don't want to cough. Hopefully it's not COVID, but I need to drink because I'm feeling a little bit.
Hopefully it's not COVID is not good enough, I'm afraid. I've just taken my COVID vaccination, so it can't be COVID, inshallah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I took my vaccination yesterday. For those of you who don't know, I'm still alive. I haven't grown any horns.
No chills, no.
I haven't grown any extra hair, no other wings.
You don't speak Chinese, Russian, or whatever else.
Any other language? I only speak English and my mother's tongue. But, ladies and gentlemen, it is a myth to suggest that COVID-19 will turn your DNA into some sort of a mutant and you will become, I don't know, an alien.
Well, it's a really good question that you ask because today we are talking about the art of arguing, and I know there are a lot of people who disagree with this view, a lot of people who agree. So what we thought today to do as part of our Sunday morning show is to talk about communication, but a better way of arguing, because it's part of the communication course, it's part of the communication practice that we have in marriage. And what we have been doing is we are introducing Ajmal's book, which we have been selling, and we pick chapters and we pick topics just for conversation. We believe that we should have more mature conversations about marriage in our community, so that's the reason why we do this work. So join us, send us some questions, tell us who you are, where you are, give us a thumbs up if you're around so we see that everything is connected and it's working.
Sometimes we don't even know if it's working unless we hear from people.
Yes.
So, we have already Ihsan Osman says Assalamu alaikum to all. Wa alaikum salam. So somebody's watching.
I still remember that brother last week who said that he has been married for 44 years. So.
This gentleman?
Yes.
MashaAllah.
Yeah,
very good. He doesn't look that old in his picture. He looks very young.
Yeah, I think it was him. Forgive me if it wasn't, but I hope it is you. So may Allah keep it longer and make us healthy and make us enjoy our marriages for a longer time. Yes, alhamdulillah. Shireen is with us. Ruzi Bibi, Assalamu alaikum. Faisal Tafadir. Salam everybody, good morning. Sunday morning is grey. It's quite depressing in London, but we are talking about the art of arguing.
I don't even know what page you're referring to.
Well, it's part of communication and it's not actually part of the book. However, there are some really important principles that we need to understand about arguing. And one of the reasons why I thought it would be a really great topic to talk about is because there's no couple who doesn't fight. But the quality of the fight makes or breaks a relationship. And just for the record, for everybody who thinks that we never argue, we argue with my husband quite a lot. We actually had a big argument.
You have an argument with your husband. I don't argue with myself.
No, we argue with each other. That's what I meant.
No, you said we argue with my husband. I said you argue with your husband.
Yeah.
I don't argue with your husband at all.
So we as a couple, we argue too. And this is not to say that we are doing this session because we never argue or we know exactly, what the triggers are. It is a learning process for both of us still. And we have been married for nearly 20 years. So just for those
Can I just make it clear? I don't argue. You argue.
Even now you're arguing with me about arguing.
You
so
see, this is what my wife does. She loves arguing with me for nothing, but I don't argue.
No, never. It's just me who is arguing by myself up in the bedroom.
It's normal. Atiya Patan says Assalamu alaikum.
Salam Atiya.
Jarnahal says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, very good morning to both of you. Nice to see you. Very good topic of discussion today called how to argue. Okay, who likes arguing? Give us your... Put your hands up if you like arguing.
I think it's more like who doesn't, because everybody does.
No, I don't think so. I don't like arguing. I hate arguing.
No, me too. But there is a difference between being an argumentative by nature or you're arguing for something that is important to you. I think that we have to make that distinction. There are some people, absolutely, who are argumentative by nature. They would argue for nothing, just for the sake of it. There are also people who would argue when it's important. And I think... Again, we need to think about the difference between character and the nature, who you are. Are you argumentative?
I don't think that's true. I don't think you're born with a gene inside you that determines if you're argumentative or
not. No, there's no argumentative gene, of course, but you learn and it becomes part of your character.
So it's not nature, it's nurture. We're arguing about this too.
We are arguing.
I think arguing is part of a nurturing process. Everyone has the right, everyone is born with the innate capacity to articulate. That's what Allah says, وَعَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ. He has given us the abilities to express complex thoughts and feelings using very complicated and sophisticated words and structures. The sound of our throat and our movement of our lips and our tongue makes a whole new language, of course. However, when a child is born, if the child witnesses parents communicating well and clearly, they learn how to communicate well and clearly. If the child sees parents arguing, they learn how to argue. And if the child sees parents arguing in a civil manner, the child recognizes that arguments can be had, but in a civil manner. So argumentation, or the art of arguing, is learned. And you are born with the abilities to talk.
Okay.
That's my point.
That's your point. Absolutely, you have to argue about that.
No, it's my deeply profound belief. Aisha Pownal says, typical man never argues, typical woman discusses. Yes, true.
Yes.
Typical man never argues, typical woman never discusses. That's what I think she forgot never there. I think it has to be consistent. Typical man never argues. I get that. And typical woman never discusses.
Never discuss. I don't know what you wanted to write.
I'm sorry, Aisha. I'm putting words into your mouth there. If you don't agree with us and you want to have an argument, give us a call. I don't mind. We can actually, did you know we can get people live on our show?
I know. I think we tried to do that last couple of sessions.
We haven't.
I don't know if you can do it.
Let me see.
You can try.
So
if you wanted to come on, ask any questions, or you want to share with us your tips and what you do when it comes to arguing, let us know. And
I think they can
Ajmal
come
will
back from
respond.
Facebook.
So Ajmal can respond to you. We are doing technology. We are doing talking.
You can carry on talking. I'm just doing the technology.
So I have a very passionate, approach to this topic, and I tell you why. I had a grandmother, and some of you who know some of my stories, that I derive inspiration from my grandmother. So my grandmother was an incredibly passionate woman. So she was short and stocky, and she was really the dragon of the village in a kind of good way, because you remember my grandma. So everybody knew that when she was set on something, she would not budge. She would just go and do whatever she wanted to do. So I have a really interesting story about her, is that she was the love of my grandfather, and it was her second husband. So my grandfather was her second husband. And she by then knew that certain things you just have to do in a marriage. So she was, they lived in communist Hungary. Are you laughing at my grandma?
I'll tell you in a minute. Carry on.
So they lived in communist Hungary, and my grandmother really, really wanted to be a fashionable woman. She lived in a village, but there were not many facilities which were allowing her to become a passionate and fashionable young woman in the village. So she kept telling my grandfather that, I really need to get some clothes and I need to get some shoes. But the village was so poor, and in fact the country was so poor that they couldn't actually do much. So my grandfather got so fed up with her nudging and asking that he bought a ticket to go to Moscow, to Russia, to buy some clothes for her. So they went over to Moscow, and my grandpa was in the shop. And when my grandfather told us this story, the entire family was rolling on the ground, because he described how my grandmother was fighting, that when she picked a pair of shoes in Moscow, she said, well, I'm going to take two just in case. And then she started buying fur coats and all sorts of other things. So they walked out of the shop, and the shop assistant told my grandfather that I am really pleased that the woman is leaving this shop, because she was arguing about everything, and she didn't like this, she didn't like that. So she had a very interesting character, and I noticed this, that's why I refer to, there are people who are just argumentative there is a characteristic trait, or there is a way that you nurture this. And
I'm still not convinced.
You're not? Okay. So you don't have to be convinced. That's not one of the things about the art of arguing, is you don't need to convince the other person.
No, agree. I'm not convinced, primarily because I think everybody is born with the abilities to argue or not argue both. They don't have to, and they can if they want to. It's how parents teach it. So in my book, in page 270, there is a page I've written out, called a communication pledge. How do you talk or argue without really getting down to that level? We'll discuss that. It's a page, just to show you what it looks like, if you can see that. On this part, that's the page we're talking about. And there is a part where you agree and sign to say, I'm agreeing to these set of principles when I'm talking to you. I promise to never use foul language. I promise to think positively. I promise to speak constructively. I promise to refrain from being critical of people. I promise to not react but pause and think first. I promise to not backbite or slander. I promise to speak truthfully but fairly. I promise to speak sensitively and compassionately. Promise to speak honestly about my feelings. I promise to listen carefully. And I promise to show empathy.
Mm.
Quite a
It's a long list.
quite a long list, and I think it's a very comprehensive list. If you can make some agreements between you and your spouse about how to argue, I think you're on the winner. By the way, I forgot to apologize for starting late today. Our camera failed again.
Oh yes.
Our expensive camera failed, but the dodgy, small, cheap camera works. I hope the quality of our broadcasting is as good. The other camera's broadcasting quality is very, very high.
Yeah, it would have been better, but we will fix it then, inshallah, next week.
Yeah. So apologies for delaying, but let's go back to argument. So what were you going to say about the principles of argument?
So I think one of the things that we know from experience and also with working with people is that there is a style and there is a particular way, the form of how each couple argues, and it's the same, and you develop that together. Because there are two types of, for me, my understanding is there are two types to an argument. One is the content, what are you arguing about? And those of you who argue by the time 2 hours after, you don't even know what you are arguing about because you just keep, doing things and saying things. So there is the content, what you are arguing about, but there's also a form, there's a style and a way how couples argue. And one of the things that we do as couple, I think, and feel free to disagree, but one of the things that we do is we fall back onto our very same issue, a very same form of how we argue. We come back to, this is your responsibility, you haven't delivered. And that's the basis and the form of any argument. Now, whether we argue about a car or whether we argue about something else or children, the form is the same, the content is different. So the topics that we argue about, you as a couple, the topics that you argue about are probably going to be very different. But there is a foundational form in which you fall back to a pattern that you establish as a couple. So that would have been my opening statement about arguments.
Fair enough. I'll come back to it in a minute. A lot of people are saying Salam, Ihsan Usman. A few years ago, the photo, okay. Atiya Patan says Salaam alaikum. Jana Holt says Salaam alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, you read that? No, it's still coming on. So Aisha Paunel has clarified, I meant women never argue, they discuss. Of course, Aisha, you're absolutely 150% wrong.
Jana Hall agrees with me that there are some people who are argumentative by nature, true.
I don't agree with that, but never mind, it's okay. And from the woods, Assalamu alaikum, and to
salam.
the woods, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So in my case, what triggers me is when somebody makes a promise and don't deliver. That's why my arguments with you are often around, why did you not deliver the promise that you have made? My simple argument starting point. If I take something on, I will do 150%, even move a mountain to be able to deliver my promise. And when somebody doesn't fulfill their part of the promise, I feel very let down. I feel a rug has been pulled out of my feet, because had I known that they would not deliver, I would have made alternative arrangements. And if you don't deliver on the promise that you make, it makes me feel unvalued, devalued, disrespected. Why did you make that promise if you're not going to fulfill it? So keeping your promise and delivering on the promise that you've made is very important for me. And if somebody doesn't do it, even if it's my mum or dad, I will go equally mad about it. Of course, I have to be mannered, but it will make me very angry and upset, because a whole host of other activities for me is impacted by that behavior. That's why I would argue on that point. But that's not a point of argument. That's a point of contention. I disagree with what you've just done. I'm very upset with you. You should know about it. And there is no point of arguing back because somebody is expressing their dissatisfaction about something. What's the point of arguing about it? Does that make sense?
No, not to me. Because I believe that when someone doesn't deliver, whether it's me or anybody else, the first port of call is always ask why you didn't deliver, instead of accusing and say, well, you promised you will do that and it hasn't happened, and then pointing fingers. It's very easy to have ideals, and I think that's really the point for me, is that I have very high expectations of certain things. When my children don't deliver those expectations, I need to understand first, before I start screaming, I need to understand Why is it that they haven't done what they promised that
The
they would
children,
do?
yeah, the children are different. Children, you are still nurturing, you're still developing, and they're still growing with you. I get that. But as adults, if you can't take it, in the sense that if you can't take adult criticism, then don't expect adult respect. An example: if I'm responsible for picking you up from the hospital, an example, you told me your hospital appointment is at 9 o'clock. I'll come home. I need to pick you up and drop you on time. I can't fail on that. There is no room for failure. If for any reason I can't turn up, then the onus is on me to make an arrangement. I pay for a car, taxi, family, friend. Somehow I need to get you to the hospital. You don't need to argue with me about that because I've made that promise. If I fail, I need to be responsible for it, right? If you have to argue with me about that, then that's an added burden that you don't want. You have to,
No, but also life happens, and you can have an accident. You can be in a situation where you can't make arrangements. You could be in a place where you are not able to fulfill no matter what you do.
only 5% of the time.
Well, still does happen, but
Yeah.
I think there is always a room, a space, a door in an argument to ask, really honestly, curiously, why is it that you are finding it so difficult to deliver? Instead of saying, well, you didn't deliver, it makes me so upset, and I'm losing temper, losing control. That's not a solution to an argument. The solution is...
What if it happens again and again and again? The person keeps on doing the same thing because there is other priorities in their mind, and those priorities can wait. They've decided to make others as priority, and this one isn't a priority for them. However, for the smooth running of the family, this priority is essential. What about that? What if somebody keeps on just neglecting it?
Then the conversation, I don't think the conversation is about pointing fingers and say that you are wrong and you haven't delivered. It's if she's neglecting and she didn't neglect it before, or he did neglect it before, there must be a reason why the person came to the conclusion.
Well, I think that's where the trigger starts, when you start making unilateral decisions by yourself on a joint agreement, and you just let the other person down without actually having that. If I'm going to break my promise, I need to tell you about it. So argument begins. The two root causes of argument starts from misunderstanding and miscommunication. That's where the root causes are. What is miscommunication, ladies and gentlemen? If I make a promise with you, and if I'm going to fail you in that promise, I need to explain that to you. I need to give you an option. I need to inform you. I cannot unilaterally decide I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm sorry, it doesn't work with me. I will not do that. I will do everything within my capacity to inform you. Of course, accident happens, life happens. I could be dead. I'm not ignoring all of that. So miscommunication and promises that you make and then you don't keep, those are the triggers of arguments in my view. And of course, assumptions. Assumption is a big one.
Yeah, and there is another really interesting. I think it's almost a pattern that every couple does. Is that somewhere I read they call it the kitchen sinking. I can't remember which psychologist, but somebody called it the kitchen sinking. And a kitchen sinking is something like this: you start an argument on a whatever issue, and you start putting the things just like dirty dishes into the sink. Oh, you did that, and that was 5 years ago, and you did this 15 years ago, and you did this, that, and you are like this, and you are like that. So you are piling up the dishes one on top of the other until there's nothing you can do with the sink because it's full of dishes, and by the time you realize it, you are still arguing, but you don't know what you are arguing about.
Do you know why I keep on getting absolutely mental when I see if a sink has got piled up dishes? Now you know why. Because to me, I won't even be able to find that little spoon that's at the bottom,
Right.
because I have to unearth the entire mountain to find that. So kitchen sinking is a very good analogy.
And what happens with couples, I think, is that you start throwing into the kitchen sink, you start throwing in things like what the person did, but also more dangerously, you start putting in how the person is, how horrible as a character. You start character assassination. And that's where the two things have to be separated. I may like a person or love a person, but I might hate a particular behavior. So we need to learn how to separate the two. I can't judge and I can't argue about a character. I can argue about a behavior, but not about a character, because I think that's dangerous.
Okay, let's read a few more messages. Jana Hull says, sorry, Brother Ajmal, I have to agree with Sister Hannah on her point of there are argumentative people in the world. They exist. I'm not saying they're bad people. It's just that the way they are, they deal with things differently. Fair enough. I can live with that. The next one is from the woods. From experience, I've come to accept people can't always deliver. Yes, of course, but then don't make promises. And if you can't deliver, firstly, don't make promises. And secondly, inform the other person, I'm really sorry I can't do it. Give them a bit of chance. Let them have an opportunity to make an alternative arrangement. Can't just land it on them without giving them a chance. When it happens to me with my friends, right, if they do, it really upsets me. I tell them, why did you not give me a chance? 10 minutes opportunity had you given me. Had you given me 10 minutes notice that you're going to cancel with me, I could have done something else. Anyway, Shaheen Abdulrazak.
Assalamualaikum, Shaheen. How are you? I think with that regard around the promise being broken, both sides should be able to express how they feel. It's okay to be disappointed and it's good to express it, but it's also about asking yourself, why has this person not delivered and not communicated? Often it can be around fear. Sometimes I think it points to something deeper and the dysfunction within this relationship, and that needs to be ironed out.
True,
yes,
good point.
Absolutely.
Very good point.
Very good, thank you.
There is no need to be afraid in a relationship, and if you're afraid in a relationship, then that's a problematic relationship. There are other reasons people could have fear, of course, I understand that, but it is important to read that again and again, what Shaheen Abdulrazak is saying, that we have to ask ourselves, why is this person failing and not communicating? It's a very good point, actually, that makes me wonder why people fail and why people fail to communicate. The other thing I often see is that people develop expectations. The expectations based on assumption or based on false expectations could be another reason why people argue. Right?
Yeah. So I think the combination of knowing what is it that you get triggered by and you will argue about. So that's one really good way, and that's like anything in relationship. I think it's the idea of an argument, even an argument. And I was talking to one of my clients last week, and I said, how can you argue with love? Is that it's okay to argue, but what makes a relationship ugly and any marriage ugly is that you argue in an ugly way. And I remember it must have been about 15 years ago or even more, probably at the very beginning of our marriage. The first time I realized we had an argument and the word ugly came to my mind. I think it must have been about the second year of our marriage. And I was really shocked by the feelings and how we argued. It turned into really ugly argument. So that's what you don't want to do. You are more than welcome to disagree. You are more than welcome to even argue, but don't make it ugly. How can you argue with love?
You know, there is a saying, great people think or discuss events. Small-minded people discuss people. So if you reduce an argument into personality assassination or character assassination, that becomes ugly. But if you keep to the topic and discuss the point that you're wanting to express, it's no longer a nasty thing to talk about. And then Aisha Pownal says, often arguments are started from the misunderstanding from other, i.e. people outside the marriage.
Yes.
In that case, a person cannot deliver if it was their job to protect their spouse. How do we discuss the bad behavior of in-laws without arguing, character assassination, etc.? In my experience, this is the big reason why couples fight. In-laws is going to be our next topic. We'll talk about in-laws next time. Next chapter in our book, actually, After Children, is about in-laws. So we'll talk about how to manage our relationship with in-laws, and we can discuss that then. But our outside people's expectations do bring into a couple's environment of safety where they argue based on external expectations
and
influences.
Yeah.
And this is very sad because you're allowing your relationship to be hijacked by people who are outside. They don't belong inside. Why are you allowing it to be hijacked? Would you allow a robber or a thief to come inside and invade your house? Physically, no. And yet you allow emotionally an outsider's view to overtake your own view and emotion, an outsider's influence to come and destroy your relationship. Argument begins.
This is often a case for couples with children and parenting, when the two sets of parents, the elderly generation, has a different outlook on how to bring up children, what to do. And when you live in an extended family scenario, you realize that it's your life is different, and fundamentally you have got different values. For example, when it comes to children, upbringing, habits, general things.
Imran has said very interestingly, I can tell from this conversation that Brother Ajmal is responsible for most arguments. Imran, thanks. When I see you, I'll sort you out, bro. In a relationship, it needs two to tango. You cannot argue on your own. So if you think me is responsible or my wife is responsible, I think you probably have got the wrong end of the stick. We have both responsible for arguments, but you can be a trigger. Who could be a trigger? Depends. It varies. Yes, in nature, naturally speaking, I'm very comfortable in a space to express my views very clearly, very openly, very confidently, even confrontationally if I need to. I've done that on television, on radio, live and pre-recorded. I do that for a living. That's not the same thing.
I think, you know what, I think it's a really good point. I think it's maybe I would alter my view that it's not the argumentative nature. Maybe people are just a lot more comfortable with conflict. And when you are comfortable with conflict and confrontation, argument doesn't even feel like a big deal to you.
Well, I don't mind.
You don't mind, I do.
Yeah.
And I have always been I'm not very comfortable with confrontation. I've never been a confrontational person. I don't necessarily like conflict. I avoid if I can. I'm much better now. And I would stand up for anything that's important to me. But by nature, I would not go out on a limb.
But what I've noticed, because you don't like conflict and you don't like confrontation, you withdraw from listening. You actually you retreat into a space where you're actually not saying anything that is substantially defending or standing for your own self. You're just retreated. It's like you're just flying away. Where I'm on the other hand, I will not let go if I need to confront. I'm quite happy to walk away, but I have no problem in confronting somebody. If somebody calls me a racist name on the street, I will face them with my full ferocious force. If somebody litters the street, I'll pick it up. I'll throw it in the bin. I'll go and tell him, hey, what have you done? I know that's by nature. That nature is not the same thing as
being argumentative.
Correct. I think that's where we are coming to an agreement. Very good.
Right.
Imran Siddiqui is already given his view. Hassan Akon says, Assalamu alaikum. And Jana Hall, go on, your friend.
Agree. Don't make promises if one can't keep, so then the person is not let down. Another Brother Rajma saying, if so, do forgive each other. However, one mustn't take advantage or disrespectful, devaluing a person's office and help. Okay, great. So Shaheen is asking, do you think this is the fight or flight response in conflict because it feels like a threat?
Yes.
So, yes, we have three responses: fight, flight, or freeze. I'm a freezer for sure. You are a fighter. Sometimes I don't flight anymore, so I don't run away from things anymore.
You freeze now.
I freeze. Yeah, I am a freezer, and I just literally need some time to think through before I can respond. And
you need to say that. Say, hey, I'm frozen now. Can we discuss this later? Instead of responding while frozen. Because if you're responding while frozen, you're not making sense. It's like me. If I become extremely angry in the name of confrontation or fighting, I may not make sense. I need to be told, hey, you're too angry now. Let's discuss this later. I think that's what I need to do. Pull myself back a bit, take a deep breath, and not allow my anger to overtake my desire to fight. You can fight without being angry. Is that understood? You can defend yourself without freezing.
Yes.
But both of that need space.
Yes, absolutely. So are you a fighter, a flyer, or a freezer? Which one are you? Which is your favorite position? I used to be a complete flight. I used to run away from everything. I think now I'm coming to an idea that I want to just understand, but I'd still freeze because it comes at me so quickly. I can't necessarily respond straight away. And I hope I never become a fighter, because then that will be the end of peace in our house. To be honest,
I don't think you will ever be a fighter, because that's
so.
not your comfort zone. I get that. That's not a problem. You don't have to be a fighter.
No,
I can't be a freezer, because I think my world would collapse around us if I was to be freezer. I would not be who I am. That's okay. It's no problem.
So which one are you? Are you fighting, flying, or are you freezing when it's an argument? What happens when someone comes at you or something comes at you and you don't know how to respond?
And why do you want to freeze? That's a question. Does it come from a childhood memory, an experience of your parents behaving in that way? Were you told to disappear? Were you told to shut up? Or were you told to put up? Were you told to vanish? What was your experience? What's got you to that space? What are you really afraid of that you freeze? You can freeze, but if you freeze to the extent where you are not defending yourself, then that's a problem. So either you move away and say, let's discuss this later, but in a civil way, or you argue your case in a civil way still and not become extreme in your fighting mode. That balance. But what is your experience? Where does it come from? Your fight or freeze mode? Where does it come from?
Thank you, Shireen. I'm a freezer, but turning into a fighter.
Oh, that's worrying,
So,
Shireen.
Shireen Malik, thank you.
Salma Begum says, so brother is lucky to have to what?
I think it's probably unfinished.
Please do complete. I would love to hear
complete
that.
the sentence.
Hassan Akon.
I consider every human being are same. It doesn't matter where it's he or she is from. The mentality is the same as a person from UK or Somalia. This is why Al-Quran is the teaching for all humanity all over the world. No different versions for poor or rich, educated or non-educated. Absolutely.
While it is true, but Allah says, وَلَيْسَ ذَكَرَ كَالْأُنْثَى. A man and a woman are not the same. Allah says that in the Quran. Why does Allah say that in the Quran? Do you know why, brothers and sisters? Because our temperaments are different. Our processing powers are very different. The entire way we think, perceive and feel, I believe is different. I don't know whether you see that, but I do. I've seen it all my life. And that's why we can't impose on one another a value system that doesn't agree with who we are. When I say value system, I'm talking about our being.
So what you ask, but I agree that we are cut out of the same cloth, naturally. So our fundamental, I think that's what the brother is saying. Fundamentally, we were created in the same
Of course.
manner and the same way. Now, on the surface, what we do, how we express that being is different. It's different in different cultures, it's different in gender, so there are lots of issues that come in. And I think when it comes to argument, and I actually speak for people who are in intercultural or interracial marriages, is that there are very different ways how people express arguments and what they do. And yet, if you really, really look at the pattern of what you picked up, you will find that every culture, there is a way how people argue. There's a way of how we express. My mother was a freezer, absolute freezer. She was a flyer. She always left the conversation without ever addressing anything. She used to, say things under her breath, and it is something I have always seen all my life, and actually had a physical vision for it. Is that she used to keep her hands up each time there was something big coming to her. She could not face it. She couldn't respond.
But she still does.
And she still does.
Talks under the breath when she's very upset. And I often wonder why she does that, and I now understand why she does that.
Yeah, because it's not something that she never learned, the art of arguing. I never learned it. So this is a very conscious process for all of us to make sure that we learn what we can. For every argument you learn. Are you laughing?
No, I'm laughing at myself. I'm thinking, how did I learn to stand up for my own self and be a fighter in the way I am? I think it's because of my experience on the streets of East London, where I was racially abused. And also my father. I've all seen all my life, a big fighter out in the world. He would fight he caught racist people on the street, and he would fight pitch battle. My father did in this country, and of course wherever he went. So I think that's how I've learned, and maybe that part of me was nurtured a bit more by me being thrown at the deep end of a conflict from the day I was born. And unfortunately,
you were born in a war.
There you go.
So think about your own patterns. So while we are looking at some of the comments, and thank you for sending us your thoughts, think about your own pattern of how did you become a fighter, how did you become a freezer, and how did you become, when you fly away, run away.
Somebody just written that. Bayan says, fight then fly.
Fly. Love it.
Well, that's terrible.
Childhood experiences are definitely significant in my case, yes.
Shireen, thank
Mine
you for
too.
that.
Thank you, Shireen. Our brother is lucky to have your sister as his wife, alhamdulillah. MashaAllah.
There is a friend of mine who said to me, I've been married for the last 20 years, and every time I look back at my wife, I just wonder how lucky she is to have me as her husband. I remember my friend Asif said that. Remember him?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. But by the way, my question to you is, how do you feel about it? When you're running away from a fight, how do you feel about running away? When you're fighting, how do you feel about it? Do you feel rotten? Do you feel guilty, ashamed? Do you feel something? And what do you do about that feeling? Because to me, it's an essential part of growth. If you can't recognize the feeling that's generated as a result of that particular experience, then you have not grown. And you need to grow. Let's read the next one. Salma Begum says, oh, she's already said it.
Yeah.
Aisha?
Aisha, from experience, fighting takes a lot of energy and leaves one depleted and the other person overcome. Winning an argument is not important as long as there is resolution. Absolutely. It's not, it's like the kitchen sink. The issue isn't about who is going to wash up the kitchen sink or clean up. It's about it has to be clean. So it's not about who is winning, who is losing. It's something absolutely spot on. That a really good argument actually is not concerned with who is winning, because that's not an argument, that's an ego fight.
Have you noticed our screen, Ibrahim, my son, our son, has done a bit of doctoring and looks nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, very tidy. Well, that's what happens when you give it to a professional.
Yeah.
When you leave it to amateurs like me, it doesn't work really.
He loves
was
doing this kind
he
of
was
things.
yesterday at Jum'ah Friday. He said, "Daddy, let me do some editing." I said, "Sure." So when I was doing the khutbah, he was sitting there editing it, and he did a good job. So we've got a good screen today. Sadly, the camera has failed, but I'm pretty upset about that.
We'll fix it.
Let's go to the next message from
Jana
Jana.
is flying. Reasons for reasoning with an angry person until the angry person calms down. I like the sunnah. Walk away kindly.
I don't think that's the only sunnah, by the way. If you're angry, then you should sit down or lie down. However, if you're being trampled over, if you're being abused, what you should do is teach the abuser not to do it again. When you do it, it's your choice. So you're not flying away, you're delaying the confrontation, delaying the conversation. That's not the same thing as flying, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't wish to engage right now, but I will engage. Don't worry, I'll come back. That's not the same thing as burying yourself in the sand or burying your head under the sand and thinking it will go away. So, Jana, while I agree, flying may be a good idea, but if you fly and become avoidant, somebody who doesn't address the issue, then that's a problem.
Basically, if you fly and you don't come back, then you haven't addressed the situation, and the situation will come back definitely. Because
So
that's
do
what
fly,
happens.
do fly.
Do fly if you need to, but don't stay out of the scenery and come back and
But
address.
don't freeze.
And don't freeze, and don't necessarily go into the fighting modes.
No, don't become raged by your fighting
Yeah.
desire. Desire to fight is fine, but enraged by the desire itself is a problem. Whenever I have become enraged, I've lost an argument. Whenever I've fought but stayed calm, I've won the argument. That's normal. So fighting is absolutely fine. What you're controlling is your anger. Freezing is not fine. Flying is okay as long as you come back. I think quite nice few rules to go through.
Any other experiences you want to share
Salma
with
Begum
us?
says, I was a fighter, but depends which situation and with whom. Someone I have never shown my anger to, I can end up freezing. But with close friends and family members, I speak my peace.
I like it. I speak my peace. Very good. That requires a lot of integrity, because really you can only speak peace when you're in integrity. When your voice is above a certain level, and I know this, when my voice is coming above a certain level or goes lower than a certain level, I don't get anywhere with any arguments with anyone.
Yesterday evening, I got really triggered in a conversation. You know why I got triggered?
What happened?
Somebody was not authentic. They were lying.
Right.
They were lying through their teeth. And evidence after evidence was mounting that they were lying, but they were trying to deny their lies.
Right.
I really lost it. I lost it. And I felt sad that I lost it. When I say I lost it, I was very upset. I said, why are you lying? Tell me the truth. I'm here to do something with you, but have integrity, have respect, be transparent about it, be honest, then I can have a good conversation. But no, kept on covering up, kept on covering up, kept on covering up. It's like that person was trying to pull a wool over my eyes, as if I'm blind and dumb.
Oh, this is very interesting, because yesterday we were watching, I have a sin to admit in public, is that I watch Ertugrul with my children.
Religiously, by the way.
Almost religiously. So
how many series have you watched?
Oh, we are on season 4.
And I have not seen a single one because I refuse
but
to.
the reason why I mention this is because there is something that we always have a discussion with the kids about what's going on screen, and this is exactly what we were talking about yesterday. Is that Ertugrul, the way he fights for justice is exactly that. Is that and there was a lot of lies and treachery and all sorts of things going around, but what he does is he is quiet and he gathers evidence. And by the time the traitor, or they call it the hain in Turkish, we are picking up Turkish. My daughter was actually in the kitchen understanding Turkish without listening or translating anything. So this is how we are religious about this. But by the time the treachery comes out, he has all the evidence in his hand. So there is no way that against evidence you could make another treachery. So it's really important that even whatever argument you are having, have evidence, because that's the only thing that you can prove calmly, because it's written.
Or
It's
don't
there.
lie. Or don't lie.
No, what I mean is, but if someone is lying
Yeah,
to
of
you,
course, of
that
course.
you need to have the evidence and to be able to say, look, you can say whatever you want to say. Here is this on paper. This is the truth. These are facts.
This is what Allah says. Whenever news comes to you, فَتَبَيَّنُوا.
Yes.
Establish the truth of it in Surah Al-Hujurat. So brothers and sisters, don't lie. If you lie, you're going to get triggered. You're going to get the other person triggered. And if you try and hide and cover up, the other person will get even worse, and therefore it's not going to get anywhere. And if you're going to speak the truth and have evidence. I think that's one way of confronting, but avoiding arguments for the sake of arguments. Lots of points coming up today.
Thank you.
Shireen
So,
Malik has written,
my father was an argumentative person and scared me quite a bit. Yes, being the youngest, I would then hide, but now I get the same feeling, wobbly legs when an argument. Oh, it's something that I wrote about in my book, and I think it's so important that your approach and your experience of arguments is stored in our body. It's called the somatic experience. Every single time, my father was an alcoholic, so every single time, even today, and I am over 40, even today, I get scared when I hear young, drunk people on the street. I have nothing to do with them, but the trigger is still the sound, the feeling, because it's not my mind responding, it's my body that stored that feeling of fear, and I don't know what's coming, I don't know when he's hitting. And when you are growing up in a household like that, your body stores up the experience, and your mind cannot speak you out of it unless you learn how to manage your body. Because
did you not tell me once you studied, when you studied neuroscience, you said every cell in our brain stores different memories.
yes,
And part of the memory storage is also the experiences that you've endured during childhood, even if it's passively.
yes, and there's a very, very interesting book. It's called The Molecule of Emotions. Is that our cells soak up particular emotions, and when anger is the emotion that you soak up a lot, then you become a naturally angry person. There are people who try to go to as many anger management courses as possible, but they don't realize that they are carrying the anger in their cells.
SubhanAllah, that's very, very powerful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Shireen.
Shireen, I'm grateful to you for being so honest about how
Thank you.
were brought up in a family where your father was very argumentative. I hope your fear you can deal with and you don't feel wobbly legs anymore. There are ways of dealing with it, inshallah. Maybe we can talk about that off the screen if you need any help and support. Get in touch with us, barefootinstitute.com. You can send us a message from there. By the way, we've not talked about the book.
Oh, we need to finish also very soon. So
when who hasn't bought the book yet? I feel like doing a roll call. All my friends, if you are listening to our program, do support us by buying my book, my wife's book. I'm going to do both today. This is my wife's book, Heart Smart, and mine is 10 Steps to Getting Married and Staying Married. Buy them together. They're all on our website. The website details is scrolling in the front of our computer. That's barefootinstitute.com/bookstore.
bookstore, yes.
Bookstore. Anyway, let's go to the next one.
Yes,
But now, trying to overcome that, I am trying to fight
through it
and
defend myself. Naturally, though, I really dislike conflict. Yes, of course. So
that's the same as our earlier message Shireen has made.
Shireen.
Thank you, Shireen. Let's go to the next one. Manjli Crowley says, Salam, I became disabled over 15 years ago and had to learn not only how to stand on my argument because I couldn't walk away, but also how to do so in a way that didn't drive the other party to walk off too. It isn't easy, as I am still learning. SubhanAllah, that's an amazing point.
Wonderful.
That the sister can't run away because she has become disabled, but she also doesn't want to lose people who are around her because of standing for her own right. Wow, what an amazing story.
It gives me goosebumps because this sister really is an example of integrity.
I want to know how.
And when you have a situation like this, how she can make the best of a situation. That she's not just giving us inspiration, but she's grown tremendously.
So can you tell us, Sister Manji, is it sister, right? Manjli, the photograph looks like a sister. So if you're a sister or a brother, please forgive us if I've got your gender wrong. Share with us how you have managed it, so we could all learn. But may Allah bless you, may Allah make you stronger. We can only make dua for you, and it's a very inspiring point here. Hina Chowdhury says, no, I feel better to leave an argument. if I need to, and if it's going around in pointless circles.
Yes, pointless circle is actually a good expression, because that's what a lot of couples do. You know, we keep going around the same topic, or the different topics, but in the same way. So that it's, I always call it like the cat that is chasing its own tail.
Dog that chases its tail.
Oh, the cat doesn't. The cat also does.
Well,
You know, the cat is a bit playful and goes around and tries to catch the tail, but it just never happens.
The expression is the dog tail.
The dog tail.
Chasing the English expression.
Shah Ali, I'm a freezer, so I can discuss later when the other person is calm. Please support my fundraising. Okay, maybe another platform.
But this is important. If you're a freezer, that's not a good thing, though. What we're saying is you should not be a freezer. What you should be is, if you want to delay the conversation, that's okay.
I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah,
when
so
it's
he's
calm.
not a freezer then. You are, of course, delayer. Brother Ajmal, we do love your strength. I see where you're coming from. We understand you, mashallah.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jana. Thank you, Jana.
Hafsa, assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Ruse Bibi, I'm a flyer. No matter how much I try and confront and prove something, you can never win with a liar. I assume.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's a different discussion, isn't it? If somebody is lying, eventually you have to say, do I want to continue this relationship with the liar, pathological liar?
Yes.
I'm talking about, because that pathological liar is creating a toxic environment.
Aisha, thank you very much. Ertugrul is not a sin sister. I think it should be on every teaching syllabus and show how human nature is. I mean, I use it as a fantastic
but
way to...
I have a problem with that.
What is that?
If it becomes addictive, then it's a sin.
Well...
It is becoming addictive, isn't it?
Well, but you want to know the story. You want to continue, and I use it as a kind of teaching.
Fair enough.
Way. Really good conversations can come out of it. And for me, what is really important is it's very difficult to keep teenagers with good material. So I would rather have them being addicted to this than to anything else.
Yes, correct.
Exactly.
Ruzi Bibi said it's best to leave it. No, it's okay to delay it, but it's not okay to leave it. If a pathological liar is causing you trouble in life, you can't just leave it. You need to deal with it. If an abuser is causing trouble in your life, you can't just ignore the abuse. You have to deal with it. So therefore, don't bury your head in the sand. Do something about it, but make sure you do them in the right way at the right time. That's fair.
Yes. Rumena Ahmed, unfortunately, communication barrier is one of the main reasons for arguments. It's important to try to understand the argument. So actually, sometimes it's as simple as you set the topic. What are we arguing about? And I know this because sometimes when I have clients and we want to set the subject or the topic for the session, sometimes it takes us 10 minutes to go around what is it exactly that we are going to be talking about today. It's not an easy thing. We think we know. In our head it makes sense. Like, I'm arguing about the children, I'm arguing about something else. But for the other person, it might be a completely different argument. So for example, in our case, maybe I was arguing about my time or my timing or my exhaustion or whatever else it was, and maybe you were arguing about something else. So when you are arguing from two different places, you don't have a subject, you don't know what exactly you're fighting about, then there is no resolution.
So identify the topic and stick to it. From the Woods, you got the wrong book, my brother. That book was written 10 years ago, the one you bought. The very thin, long book, purple color, is still available, 10 Things You Should Know About Marriage, also on our website. But the newest book is this one. It's much bigger, much thicker, 400 pages and more comprehensive, alhamdulillah. It's available. Please do buy it from our website. Ruman Ahmad says, unfortunately, communication...
I just read it, yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry.
Shaheen, how do you differentiate between leaving something for the sake of peace and addressing something as you can't argue on everything? Absolutely, we can't argue on everything. So I think for me, what makes perfect sense is that if that thing that I need to argue about, if it bites into my integrity, then I have to find a way to argue about it.
It's not just integrity. What about if somebody's abusing you, hitting you?
Oh, that's part of integrity. So if it comes and takes away my humanness, honor, dignity, integrity, then I will have to fight for it, because it's the same as you walk down the street and someone spits at you.
So
that's not integrity.
In Islam, it's called maslaha and mafsada.
Yes.
Benefit and harm. If by my action greater harm is going to befall me, then I should leave it and find a better time and opportunity to deal with it. If by my action equal harm and equal benefit would befall, then I should leave it, because there is no point in addressing it. And by my action, if greater benefit is going to come in my way and the harm is going to be reduced, then I'm obliged to deal with it. This is the Islamic rule, by the way. 3 ways of dealing with wrongs and rights. Remember these 3, maslaha and mafsada. First one, by me challenging or trying to change the situation, if I'm going to be bringing greater harm, then I should leave it. Find a different time opportunity to deal with it, but not bring greater harm on me. So changing then would be haram, because greater harm will befall you. Second one is, if it's going to be equal harm and equal benefit, then leave it, because it's working. Why are you going to change it? Because it's at an equilibrium. And obviously invest in the better so it can grow. And the last one is, if there's going to be an overwhelming benefit and the harm is going to be reduced, then it is an obligation for you to change. So for example, if somebody's a domestic abuser, beats up his wife, a sexual abuser, a controlling person who's causing trouble emotionally, physically, in every way possible, then changing that will bring about greater benefit. So you must change that. So you can't bury your head in the sand thinking you'll come back to deal with it later. So that's one example. Another example is, if you're on the street and somebody comes and calls you a name, and you look at that person and realize, if I now fight that person, I may be harmed. The person may be carrying a gun, a knife, may be stronger than me. I don't know what's going on. It's better for me to deal with it later. How do I deal with it later? Take notes of what's going on. If the person is in a car, take mental note of their car registration number. If the person has got distinct IDs or identities, remember that. Then go and report them to the police. That's a wiser way of dealing with it. And the final one, you're in a house, husband and the wife are okay, they're getting along, there's no problem, but some things you dislike and some things you like. It's not something major. Leave it. No need to be picky, no need to nitpick, no need to really poke and prod to have it your way. Do you see the difference? So when you want to change something, you need to make sure the maslaha, the benefit, outweighs the mafsada, the harm. Then you're fine. That's the rule.
Yeah. And literally, don't fight for the sake of fighting.
Yeah. Okay. Let's quickly
Great.
finish a few more messages. Bayan.
Doesn't it depend on your spouse? I tend to adapt depending on who I'm dealing with. Knowing someone hates confrontation, for example, you can't be as headstrong as you would usually be. I can't expect others equally to adopt to the way I am. Mr. Ajmal, shall I give you your spoiler for season 5? No, don't give us a spoiler for season 5.
Mrs. Ajmal, not me.
Oh, Mrs. Ajmal, sorry. No, don't give me that, because I'm still very committed to complete the episode. So thank you very much. But very good point, by the way. Very good point, that you have to know, in a really good marital relationship, you have to know how your spouse is. If you know your spouse is a fighter, you have to be aware of it. If you know your spouse is a freezer, a flyer, you need to know, because it probably needs a bit of adaptation on your part, on everyone's part, to be able to get that argument in a more harmonious way.
Correct, I agree with that. Hafsa Adam says, jumped on late, but on what I have heard, mood plays a huge part. Low mood affects how we perceive others. It's better to apply a bit of self-care. Of course, raise the energy, mood, then communicate and deal with the issue with healthier perspective.
Absolutely.
Agree entirely.
Thank you.
Anwar Ibrahim Muhammad, why do you think the older generation were married longer than current ones? Marriages only last a few years, if not months. Also, Muslims, there is a pressure to get married quickly when they meet someone without really knowing that person. Your opinion. We'll discuss that when we talk about how to get married. So forgive us, we're going to have to run through this. Ruzi Bibi says, I tried changing the person, but it's in his nature. He never changes. You should never get married to change the other person. You accept them for who they are. If you try and change them, they will explode. They will decompose. They will just not be, they don't exist. Accept them for who they are. Help them to see what they need to change rather than you changes. Anna Bay.
Haha. Ataya, I learned quite late in life how to stand up for myself, but I do it now as a matter of principle, as an example of my children. I also make it known to them that sometimes let some things go as the other person will realize by themselves. Absolutely.
Sure.
I think standing up for ourselves it's not gender specific, and I think it's everyone's journey. And marriage is really a great ground to learn how to stand up for yourself, because we don't get education in this field.
Indeed, we don't.
Most of us, we just go through life and we never know what it means to be standing up for ourselves.
Just because we started a little bit late, we're going to finish now, inshallah. Aisha Parnal says, wonderful talk, mashallah. Thank you both for being so honest and open. We need to have platforms like this to learn how to become closer as couples, even when we argue. Shamsa Ahmad says, I know my other half is a fighter and can argue but become rude. I don't like this. I become a fighter and defender, but we don't benefit at the end.
Absolutely. So knowing that your other half is a fighter, that's step number one. When you know that how to deal with it. Now the issue here is that rudeness. It's actually in the pledge. Rudeness should never be part of a conversation. If you swear, if you are rude, if you call names, that is not communication. That is not art of argument. It's literally throwing slurs at each other. Doesn't take you anywhere. So the pledge is on the...
Let's quickly finish off. Do you want to read? Shall I read, or do you want to read?
I can quickly read it.
270. Just as a sum up for our conversation, if you're having an argument, pause and think, and between the couple, make a promise. Go ahead.
So a communication pledge. From today, I promise never use foul language. I promise to think positively, to speak constructively, to refrain from being critical of people. I promise to state my needs clearly, not to react but pause and think first. I promise not to backbite or slander people. I speak truthfully but fairly. I promise to speak sensitively and compassionately. I promise to speak honestly about my feelings, listen more carefully, and show more empathy. So this is a very comprehensive list, and even if you just rectify one or two after an argument, you are already better off than you were before.
My suggestion is copy this on a piece of paper and put it on your fridge. Instead of becoming a freezer, going inside, follow these rules. May Allah bless you all.
Thank you so
From
much
myself
for
and my wife today, we are finishing. It's finishing today, saying what? Assalamu alaikum. By the way, before I say Assalamu alaikum, please buy the book. I keep on saying this.
I know, and see you next week.
Because we've got so many copies. We need to get as many copies sold as possible. With your support, we can. Even if you don't buy it, share it with other friends and family so that they can buy it too, inshallah. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
See you next Sunday. Assalamu alaikum.